Welcome, everybody, to a special post-game edition of All In with Art Stapleton, a New York Giants podcast brought to you by NorthJersey.com and The Record. I am your host, Art Stapleton, and again, here in the press box at MetLife Stadium, fortunately to be in one of the broadcast booths for our podcast today. And, more of the same for the New York Giants. We had another plane and banner flown overhead of MetLife Stadium, and another loss. That's 9 straight losses. The Giants are winless in 8 games at home. That matches 1974 when they played at the Yale Bowl in Connecticut, and matches in terms of having a winless regular season. But fortunately for these Giants, they still have one more home game left to go, and that's on the 29th of December against the Indianapolis Colts, who the last time they were here kind of sets up a mirror image of what's gone right for this regime and what's gone wrong. Is that the Colts were the team that the Giants beat to qualify for the playoffs in Brian Daboll's first season. Daniel Jones, the quarterback at the time, was chanted off the field in celebration by the crowd, and the Giants basically whacked the Indianapolis Colts. Now, 2 years later, the Colts will be here in late December, after Christmas, after the start of Hanukkah, and we shall see where they are if their losing streak reaches 10. They play in Atlanta next weekend, and then they return home, and then in Week 18, the regular season ends in Philadelphia. So let's talk about this game a little bit, and to me, as I wrote in my postgame column on NorthJersey.com, it begins and ends with the quarterback spot. And I'll get to that, but I also want to mention, again, about 90 minutes before kickoff this morning, the plane crew were at it again. No one is claiming responsibility for the plane that is flying the banner, kind of taken 3 or 4 laps around MetLife Stadium. Today, the banner, again directed at John Mara, it was, "Mr. Mara, enough. We won't stop until you fire everyone." Now, a little bit more pointed this week, a little bit more of a tease, not a tease, but a taunt and a little bit of a threatening nature for this message, as opposed to last week when it was, "Please fix this dumpster fire." And, I do think that while the plane and the banner and the messaging certainly has a little bit of an impact, it didn't have an impact, or as big of an impact, last week, because the Juan Soto news broke on Sunday night. So I think it essentially took everybody off the back page regarding the Giants. But it's kind of weird at this point that whoever is responsible for the messaging and the plane and the banner and trying to get the attention that they're getting or not getting, they're not coming out. And I can promise you, every media outlet, including yours truly, has put it out there. Look, if you want to tell your story, if you want to express your frustration in different ways, rather than spending, the $500 to $1,000 that you're spending on this plane, DMs are open, emails are open. Let's talk about this story. Let's write about this, because that's what happened in 1978. Is the fans came forward and said this was our group. And you got to remember, back then, when you're packing a ballroom at the Ramada Inn in Clifton, it's 1978. I mean, there's no social media, there's no emails. Media is just completely different. So nowadays, you would think if you want that out there, it's very easy to get your story out there. So for some reason, whoever is paying for the plane, paying for the message, I think it's a little curious. That's all I'll say. Is it coming from a fan or group of fans? Is it coming from a media company? Is it coming from content creators? At this point, I just don't know what the purpose is, other than falling flat for that messaging the way it's happening. Yes, it's happening in a very small circle. Yes, to see a plane up ahead on top of around MetLife, but there was also a banner being pulled for a prospective governor in New Jersey. I don't think it's hitting home the way it needs to get home, and the reality is, some of the pain that the Giants fan base and the organization as a whole is enduring, it goes well beyond a banner, goes well beyond the messaging on a banner. If John Mara decides that he is going to fire Brian Dable or going to fire Joe Shane or make changes in the organization, it's not going to be like what happened in 1978, that the franchise was coerced by the league to hire a GM in George Young. It's not going to be that. If they're going to make changes, they're going to make changes not because of a banner, but because of the results and because they've lost faith in the process that is going on here. So we can get to that a little bit more. I've talked about that constantly. I told you where I feel. I just don't think – I know it's impossible for you, the audience, to separate the entire decade into just the last 2+ years for Brian Dable and Joe Shane, and I get it. It all kind of rolls into one another. The idea, the mistakes that they made in 2015 just kind of goes through that whole decade of despair and disgust that I wrote about on NorthJersey.com. But again, I want to get back to the quarterback. But the first question I got from my guy Eric Stanson, Lakeland's own, back when I covered high school, third baseman, I believe it was, for the Lancers, is with our buddy Paul, our producer Paul Wood, his K-12 tailgate. Eric wants to know who else the Giants are going to sign at quarterback this week. Well, I can tell you it won't be Eric Santagato from Lakeland, going back to our old all-county days when I covered high schools in North Jersey. But I have a feeling that the Giants will be signing a quarterback. Tommy DeVito is in the concussion protocol. Drew Lock is still limping around from that heel injury. And then you have Tim Boyle, who, was on the street last month before the Giants signed him to the practice squad after Daniel Jones requested his release and he was waived. So I want to talk more about the quarterback situation. And this is a weekend to talk about it. As I recorded on Friday, I was at the Heisman in Times Square at the Marriott Marquis, got to talk to Cam Ward, wrote several quarterback stories Thursday and Friday, talked to Cam Ward about the Giants. I was very impressed. He's a humble guy, but he's also one of those situations where, I think he's confident that he can make any play on the field. So the Cam Ward situation is important. Then Friday night, the video comes out. Malik Neighbors with Isaiah Simmons, and Malik Neighbors on the street near Times Square having a catch with Shedeur Sanders, who's in town for the Heisman, not for himself as a finalist. He finished 8th for his teammate, Travis Hunter at Colorado, who ends up winning the Heisman. So here's the story behind that. From what I gather from talking to Isaiah Simmons and talking to others, that Isaiah Simmons and Malik Neighbors were out and about in New York City Friday night doing some holiday shopping. They ended up at a jewelry store outside of Times Square. They walk into the jewelry store, and who's sitting there? Shedeur Sanders. So a chance meeting, according to Isaiah Simmons, that what is Shedeur doing here? Oh, my God, you're in town for the Heisman. Oh, that's funny. So somehow there's a football there in the jewelry store. My guess is it's a gift from some other Giant or someone who had shopped at that jewelry store. Now all of a sudden that football is outside being tossed between Shedeur Sanders and Malik Neighbors, potential future teammates of the New York Giants. It's pretty crazy. The video went viral, and, that kind of set a narrative for this weekend. As I told you, the Cam Ward stuff, and now Shedeur Sanders with Malik Neighbors. Now you fast forward to today. Tommy DeVito gets a concussion late in the first half. Tim Boyle takes over in the second half. Doesn't look disastrous for Tim Boyle, especially for a guy who has not taken any reps with the first team. And Boyle made some nice throws. A couple of them he just kind of chucked it up there, knowing that he had single coverage. They didn't have it blocked up front, and the Giants took advantage, whether it was pass interference or the touchdown, the 23-yarder to Malik Neighbors, 10 catches, 82 yards for Neighbors, and the touchdown, his first touchdown since Cleveland. So it was a good game for Malik. Without that touchdown and the 23-yarder, it was really a lot of dinking and dunking for Malik. And yet still, he's out there grinding along. And I think that's the best thing you could say about the Giants is that, look, it's not the standard. It's a low bar. They lost 35-14. They were underdogs by 16.5 points. That was the highest spread for them at home as underdogs since 1966. And that season, their home was Yankee Stadium in the Bronx. So I think the reality is that it's about the quarterback, right? And I mean, I've been saying this all along. To truly change this, the Giants need a quarterback. If you don't have a quarterback, you don't have anything. And that's the reality of it. The Giants knew it back in 2004 when they drafted Eli Manning. And they stuck with Eli Manning, and they had a quarterback for 16 years. Yes, the latter end of Eli's career, you can say a lot of mistakes were made, but the reality is they had a quarterback. And now you look at quarterbacks getting hurt left and right. I mean, think about where the Giants are at quarterback right now. Daniel Jones, before today, had thrown the last touchdown pass that they had, November 3rd, to Theo Johnson. Theo Johnson's on IR. Daniel Jones was waived. He's now in Minnesota on the practice squad. Then Tommy DeVito took over, started against Tampa, hurt his forearm. On a short week, Drew Lock started against the Cowboys and then came back and started against the Saints last Sunday. Then Drew Lock hurts his heel. Tommy DeVito is back as the number one quarterback. He gets hurt in the first half today, and now Tim Boyle finishes the game. So the Giants have had 4 quarterbacks this year. It's unheard of. You can't win games in the NFL with 4 quarterbacks. So this idea that you want to change the head coach, you want to change the general manager, yes, and it's in part their own doing, 100%. You can make that argument. If you want to fire Joe Shane and Brian Daboll and say they haven't gotten a quarterback, that's your prerogative. But the bottom line is I want to see these guys with a quarterback. They are now in position. And I said this last week, and I wrote this column. The dirty little secret in the NFL is you can't just lose in order to get yourself the best shot at that quarterback. You've got to lose poorly. You've got to be at the top of Tankathon. You've got to look like you got no clue how to win in this league. Congratulations. You're 2-12. The Giants right now, pending the result of the Raiders tomorrow night on Monday Night Football against the Atlanta Falcons, are number 1 in the Tankathon draft order for next year. So if by some chance the Raiders win tomorrow night against Atlanta, which is possible, or next week, I believe it's the Raiders and the Jaguars, the Giants are more than likely, if they lose out, are going to be in the top 2 picks. So does that mean Sanders or Ward? Probably. But the reason, that's all the backdrop on the Giants side. Now you want a reminder, you want a smack in the face if you're telling me that the quarterback position doesn't matter. I've had people tell me that, it's more than the quarterback. It's more than the quarterback. Take a look at the other side of the ball today, the other side of the field here at MetLife. And look what Lamar Jackson did for that franchise. Two-time NFL MVP. Yes, I understand where he was drafted. Drafted late in the first round. The Ravens made a huge call, drafted him, and now they're reaping the benefits. But if you were to redraft, he would have been selected 1 or 2 in that draft. So don't tell me, well, it's not. No, you go after the quarterback when you have the best chance at getting that quarterback. And Lamar Jackson throwing for 5 touchdowns today, making it look so easy. Now, the Giants roster is what it is right now. You have a lot of guys who wouldn't be off of a practice squad or would be reserve guys. And everybody bumps up the depth chart. All I hear today was, oh, look at the returns on the special teams, and Giants are just not well coached. It's the personnel on the field. At this stage of the game, you're in week 15 of the NFL season. You're 2-12 for a reason. The reality is that this is where the team is. Yes, it's of their own doing. There's no excuses. There's no mulligans. The Giants are what they are. But look at what Lamar Jackson does for that franchise. Yeah, are you guaranteed that Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward will be Lamar Jackson? No, not at all. But you've got to take that swing. And you've got to be in the position to take that swing. And the Giants are earning their spot to be in that position to take that swing. And it's not an easy thing. But that's why I keep saying John Mara needs to bite his lower lip, deal with all the hate, and deal with the disgust. And if you're going to lose customers, you lose customers until you win again. Look in Detroit. It's sad to say, but Detroit fans that opened their wallets 10 years ago, if you gave up on the Detroit Lions, well, I don't know if you're running back to today of what they are today. But the Lions finally got it right. And when did they get it right? They got it right when they hit on the quarterback. Not a drafted quarterback, but they got lucky. They traded Stafford for a throw-in for Goff. And now Goff is playing MVP-level football. And yeah, they've got the coach who everybody loves and the GM who everybody loves. But the reality is the Lions are there. Look at the Texans. Look at Washington. If you get the right quarterback, you can change it very quickly. No, you can't win a championship with just the quarterback. But you can certainly lift your franchise a lot higher than what it is right now. I mean, it's just a tease for Giants fans. I mean, let's be honest. And Brian Daboll knows it. Will Brian Daboll get an opportunity to coach another stud quarterback? I'm not sure. But don't tell me that Brian Daboll didn't deserve the credit he got coaching Josh Allen. Talk to anybody up in Buffalo what Josh Allen was as a rookie, how much Brian Daboll helped change him. Heck, talk to Josh Allen. Yeah, you look at Josh Allen now. Josh Allen gets a lot of the credit, and he should. He has the skill. But anyone who was up in Buffalo that you talked to talked about the influence on Josh Allen that Brian Daboll had. And I know Giants fans want to look at it and say, well, Daboll hasn't done anything for this offense. And look, this offense is only averaging 14 points a game. And it's the player at quarterback. You can't win in this league without a dynamic quarterback. And if you do, you better have a lot of other things go right. And the Giants don't have that right now. They don't. And I think, when you look at what's going to happen next, that's a reason why we're putting so much emphasis on who the next quarterback is. And you can go back to the Daniel Jones thing and say Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll had their opportunity to bring another quarterback in, and they signed Daniel Jones to the extension. Again, we've been through this. It's very easy to look back on it and say they should have done this, should have done that. A first-year coach and a first-year GM feeling their way through a season, won 9 games, then won a playoff game in Minnesota against a team that won 13 games. The quarterback and the running back were reasons for that run. They felt good about themselves. This is a team. This is a team that had not won a playoff game since the Super Bowl. And now you're talking about being in that position and where they were. And I think it's a lot easier to look back on it now. Now, some of you, I give you credit. You said it. They should have just blown it up in that moment and treated that season for what it was. But you've got a first-year GM in Joe Shane who's trying to build things back then. And his plan going in was to reevaluate the entire season, to start putting together his own personnel department and scouting staff and figure out the strengths and weaknesses of the people in his building. And then at the end of that season, had they finished as poorly as anticipated, they likely would have said goodbye to Daniel Jones. They likely would not have franchise tagged Saquon Barkley, and they would have been in position to get a quarterback. But they weren't, because Brian Daboll and his coaching staff and the players that were here responded to everything that they did. And then you looked at it and you said, boy, they really got something going. So as Daboll has said, but even more so as Shane has said, going into last season, they were probably blinded by their success. They made decisions to try to accelerate something. They were trying to figure out what they could possibly do further. They had injuries. Jones did not play well. Then he got hurt. Then he got hurt again. Tyrod Taylor got hurt. Tommy DeVito had to come in and play and won 3 games. As I've said, I think Brian Daboll did a better coaching job or as good of a coaching job last year as he did in year 1 when he won the Coach of the Year in the NFL. But that's either here nor there now. The Giants are where they are. They're 2-12. They got planes flying over the Meadowlands. You've got a fan base that is disgusted and fed up. And I think there's a lot of fans who still want blood from the Ben McAdoo failure and the Pat Shurmur failure and Dave Gettleman's regime and Joe Judge. And as I've said, this is very, very hard. And I'll go to a question that Paul passed along from another one of our guys out at the K-12 tailgate, Tony Maffey, saying, do you believe this is worse than the 70s? And he believes it's worse. But I can't speak to that. In 1978, when they flew the plane around, I was 5. So I really wasn't focused on the Giants, honestly. But it is for those people. Those people back then can speak to that. Don't tell me because you look at on paper and you say, oh, it was as bad. Look, in 1978, the Giants had never won a Super Bowl. And those changes that were made when George Young came in, George Young was not an immediate success. George Young had a different coach in mind. He had Ray Perkins here, and then the strike happened, and Ray Perkins went to Alabama. And Bill Parcells was the defensive coordinator, and he was upgraded to head coach in 1983. And Parcells won 3 games. And George Young wanted to make a change at head coach and wanted Howard Schnellenberger to come here. And Schnellenberger said, I need another year in Miami. So they kept Parcells. And then 84 is when everything really took off. They win the Super Bowl in 86. They win it again in 90. And the Giants are a different franchise. So you can't compare the 70s because you have 4 Super Bowls right now. So there are 4 trophies in the lobby of your facility that have set a standard that wasn't set back in the 70s. And yes, the Giants had 1 NFL championships and what the franchise was, but it's not the same. It's apples and oranges of where the NFL was then versus the merger in 70 and then what became of that afterwards. So, Tony, I appreciate the question. I can't quantify how similar or dissimilar what the Giants are going through now compared to what they went through in the 70s. All I know is in the 70s, they had yet to win a Super Bowl. This team just won a playoff game a couple years ago. So this idea of John Mara fixed the dumpster fire, they've tried and failed. They have tried and failed, and they're going to continue to try. But if you get rid of this regime now without getting him the right quarterback and without giving him a shot, there's no guarantee that you're going to move forward. It's going to feel good to some of you if they get fired. I know some of you are tired of hearing Dable give non-answers in press conferences and Joe Shane and the inconsistency, if you will, in Joe Shane's messaging from year 1 to year 2 to year 3. But these are guys who are learning on the job. And yeah, the NFL is not a good place to learn on the job. But when Joe Shane came here, he did not say, I know everything. He said, I'm going to evaluate and see what's what. And when he talked on the bye week, he said, I'm still learning as a general manager. There are general managers in this league who it takes a little time to get used to what your system is. Should the Giants be granted those time? That's not my call. It's not my call. If John Mara, you want to know who knows if this is truly like the 70s? It's John Mara. John Mara grew up with this team. John Mara is a fan of the Giants before he became the team president of the Giants. Now, I know there's been a lot of talk, the idea of should the Giants have a director of football operations. I know that's a big thing that's being talked about. John Mara is the team president, okay? The way the structure is, it's team president, general manager, and then they have people around the player of personnel, which is Tim McDonald, who is of the Mara family. He's John's nephew, Susan's son. So one of the Mara, he is basically Wellington's, one of his grandsons. So I think the reality is that we've gotten to a point where everyone just wants to throw ideas out there and say, okay, well, what about this? What about that? What about this? I find it hard to believe if you're going to bring someone to be above the general manager and the head coach, then you might as well start fresh. You might as well just bring in a new GM. If you want to insert a different structure, then change the structure, change the people, and then you're going backwards again. Now, is it two steps back in order to be able to take 3 steps forward eventually? I can't say that. I don't know. I really don't know. All I know is I can tell you in the moment, to me, I would give this regime another shot. That hope that you get a quarterback that you can build around. You get another good draft class to go with this draft class. You hope that maybe some of the players, it's kind of funny. 3 weeks ago, the Giants would not be Joe Shane was not getting credit for Micah McFadden as a player. Wasn't getting credit for Micah McFadden and how good of a player he is and he's become. He's a solid starter. He's a foundational piece. He is. He's shown that over the last month or so. Where does that stack him? Does he have to be a Pro Bowler in order to be a successful player? No. Is he as good as Chase Blackburn was? Well, he doesn't have the opportunity to make the plays that Chase Blackburn made on the biggest stage in football. But Micah McFadden is more of a defensive starter than Chase Blackburn was. So you need players like Micah McFadden. And that's a player from Joe Shane's first draft class. That's somebody here that they drafted that they're now developing in year 3. And maybe he has an opportunity to be a starter here. The way he's played over the last couple weeks has really been a boost. Now, granted, they gave up 35 points today, so nobody has really been a boost. But you look at the way Brian Burns played. Has 8 sacks on the season now. The guy is continuing to play and push forward. Joe Shane was ripped for that trade, continues to be ripped by people who just want to rip it. It was a good trade. Yes. Could you have gotten that second corner with the number 2 pick, with the second round pick that you traded to Carolina? Maybe. Maybe you could have. Maybe you should have. Maybe it would have been a better move. But all I know is Brian Burns is 26 years old. What I've seen from Brian Burns to this point, I badly want to see Brian Burns on a winning team. And I know Brian Burns badly wants to be on a winning team. This guy got his contract. Okay, this is all you need to know about Brian Burns. He got his contract. This team is 2-12. If you watch Brian Burns the last couple weeks, this guy today got flattened not once but twice by trailing and chasing Lamar Jackson and just getting blindsided by a lineman of Baltimore. And he kept coming back and kept being on his field. He is a guy that I want as a cornerstone on this franchise if I'm a Giants fan. I'm not quick to rip Joe Shane and say Brian Burns is not a good player. You know what? You can make mistakes. I don't believe Brian Burns is a mistake. And if you look at that salary over the next 2 years, when Brian Burns continues to play here and continues to have an impact, Brian Burns is an asset for the Giants. So I know you don't want to give Joe Shane credit, and I know you want to talk about the busts that he's had in the draft, and trading for Darren Waller last year was a mistake. Darren Waller and trading for him is not the same as trading for Brian Burns. Last year, they traded for Darren Waller because they were unable to get a number 1 target for Daniel Jones. They were accelerating the process because they thought they could build off of what Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley did in 2022. They couldn't get a wide receiver 1, so they decided to make the play for Darren Waller. And in the summer, boy, we looked at him and said, they really got something here. He was dominant. And then the injury happened again, and we ended up seeing the player that the Raiders ended up trading away. And Waller retires last year. But I would much rather – I think it's funny because when Dave Gettleman was general manager, everyone wanted to know how come Gettleman wouldn't swing for the fences, make big plays, make big moves. Now Joe Shane makes big moves, and it's why does he have to make big moves? Why doesn't he just keep his draft picks and then he can pick the players? But then he picks the players and the players aren't good, so it's why are your drafts so bad? Why aren't you bringing in players who can actually play? And around and around and around we go. So, like I said, there are 3 games left after this one. Atlanta, home to the Colts, and then in Philly. And then we'll see. I still think Shane and Dable will be back. I don't know what John Mara is thinking. I don't know if John Mara is looking at 2-15 eventually, and if it matters to him. I know it matters. I know him losing games at home is just gutting him because I know John Mara. I've talked to John Mara. I've gotten to know him for 15 years. No, I am not paid by John Mara. No, I don't break bread with John Mara. I don't go to his house. I don't have lunch with him. But I've had enough of a conversation and a relationship that I think I know where he stands. And I just can't tell you that I think John Mara is going to fire everyone. I just don't. I don't know if that's where he's at. I think he believes in the people he has here. I don't know if embarrassed is the right word. I think angered, disappointed, frustrated, probably a little self-pity. Why does this keep happening to us? Why do we keep losing? It's painful. But I don't know if they're ready to completely wipe the slate clean yet again. And if they do, well, then maybe they get lucky the next time. And maybe the coach and the general manager that you bring in picks the right quarterback or trades for the right quarterback or signs the right quarterback. And some of these players that were drafted here start performing better. I don't know the answer there. But the question the last question I got from Paul, I'm looking in our chat. Jay Kranjak, if that's how you pronounce your name, Jay, wants to know, will the Giants be the first team to go 0-9 at home? Yes, because only 2 years ago was the first year that they had 9 home games. So, yes, they would be the first team in the NFL to lose 9 games at home. Does that matter to you? It doesn't matter to me. But as a fan base, I'm sure it's embarrassing. I'm sure you don't want it. But again, I say this. Is it means to an important end? Do you need to lose and lose every game to get to 2-15 in order to get your quarterback? In a year's time, if you have Jaden Daniels running your franchise, was it worth it to put up with 2 months of, man, this is embarrassing. Man, we got fans wearing bags on our heads. Man, we can't sell our tickets for nothing. Well, guess what? 2 years ago, Giants fans were screwed by the PSLs. It didn't matter that they made. How much more money did you make 2 years ago when you were in the playoff hunt? Probably not much. The PSL screwed you regardless, and that's the truth. Season ticket holders, I feel for you. It is not the proposition that you were sold on. You were sold a bag of goods. And is that John Mara's fault? Is that the organization's fault? Absolutely. They should have known that this is the way it was going to happen. So I feel for every season ticket holder who had to pay for a PSL and can't make money on his tickets or her tickets, and families that have waited for years to get season tickets to the New York Giants. Now we're dealing with this and empty seats. And boy, if we can sell these tickets to the Ravens and make $1 back, it's tough. So I get the frustration. I get it. But if you look at it from a pragmatic point of view, if you get the quarterback and you needed to lose to get to the quarterback, was it worth it? And that's the answer that needs to be asked. You need to figure it out when it comes down the stretch. As I'm sitting here, I got 4 o'clock games are running up on these TV screens. So bear with me if you see my eyes float a little bit. Also, I got my fantasy game. I'm down big right now. Won the division, came back. Run CMC, came back without Christian McCaffrey, won our division. But we're in a battle today, and I think I got like 3 touchdowns in the past 2 minutes that are flashing on my phone. So maybe I'm getting a little bit of a comeback. But that's where we're at off of today. Couple notes before we move on out of here. Malik Neighbors is now at 90 catches for the season. That's one off of the Giants' rookie season record. Odell Beckham Jr., Saquon Barkley. So Malik Neighbors has 3 weeks to get 1 catch or 2 catches to actually reset the record for the Giants. I would guess that he's going to get it. We don't know who is going to play quarterback. As we said in the open, I'm not sure who the quarterback will be this week. I would assume Tommy DeVito is going to be in concussion protocol. Drew Lock did not look like he was firing back on all cylinders from that heel today, that he was walking out there and did not look great. Maybe it changes. So do they have to sign another quarterback off the street to be the backup? We'll have to see. So that's kind of where we're at. Another thing that I thought was very good today, Tyrone Tracy in pass protection. Go back. You want to watch this game. Go see Tyrone Tracy, some of the blitz pickups that he had. To me, it was a big part of his game today. You're going to look at statistics and, not really think that Tracy had a great game. What he did in blitz pickup and pass protection, I guarantee you he will be praised in his running backs room tomorrow and his meeting room, the overall meeting room when they watch film. Now, again, I get it. A lot of you fans are going to look at me and go, but Art, they're 2-12. What's the difference? I'm trying to give you the big picture, but I'm also trying to give you things that are worth praising and saying, you know what, maybe we can build there. Maybe that's something that we can build on. And like I said, I'll close with this. The Giants closed today with a quarterback they signed off the street 6 weeks ago in November. Daniel Jones was released. They signed Tim Boyle off the street. It's kind of poetic that a weekend that begins with a viral video in a street outside of Times Square with Malik Neighbors catching passes from Shedeur Sanders ends with a quarterback the Giants actually signed off the street throwing a touchdown pass to Malik Neighbors. Now, if you can make the handoff from Tim Boyle to Shedeur Sanders or to Cam Ward, I would say the Giants are in a better position on that day than they have been in quite some time. So, thanks for watching today. Thanks for listening. All you old school, all-in listeners, appreciate you still listening to the podcast on all the podcast platforms. For those of you who've made the transition from audio to video and catch us on YouTube, thanks to you. I will be back at some point this week. We've got a good feature this week on Casey Rogers, who is the undrafted rookie defensive lineman for the Giants. I think you'll enjoy it, and I'm looking forward to being able to write that. Pretty emotional story for the holiday season. Meant a lot to him for the My Cause, My Cleats, My Cause, My Cause, My Cleats 2 weeks ago. We'll hopefully get to that this week. So for Paul Wood, all the guys at K-12 who continue to send in questions, I appreciate it. Anyone else listening to All In, if you want questions answered on the next All In, make sure you either reach out to me on social media, art_Stapleton, or you can email me, stapleton@northjersey.com, or write it in the comments on YouTube on this podcast when it goes up tonight. And I will do my best to answer those questions at some point this week. So again, for my producer, Paul Wood, I'm Art Stapleton, here from MetLife. Final score, Baltimore Ravens 35, New York Giants 14, 2-12, 9 straight losses, winless at home. Is there a light at the end of the tunnel? Well, there was a light on a street in Manhattan that captured Malik Neighbors catching passes from Shedeur Sanders. Is that the future of the New York Giants? We shall see, and we will be all in following that all the way through, now to April and beyond. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you some point this week.